Welcome to the Rock the Stage Show. Each week, international media expert Rich Bontrager has in-depth and personal conversations with celebrities, top leaders, authors, speakers, and media professionals. Now, from the Rock the Stage studios, here's your host, the Trigger, Rich Bontrager.
Welcome back, Sunday night, and Rock the Stage Show is back again with another great interview, discussion, and just an all-around good time. Great to have you with us here tonight. Kick back and relax because we're going to have a very special show dealing with partly entertainment, partly leadership, and it's all going to come together. But let me ask you this question. What does make a supercharged leader today? What makes those leaders, those ones that they seem to have that magnetism, they pull people in, and no matter what they do or say, people will follow them. They love those type of leaders. People talk about leadership presence, and it's kind of a mysterious thing. Some people have leadership presence. Some people don't have leadership presence. But what if there was a way that leadership presence could actually give you a competitive edge and you could learn it? You could actually learn this skill. Well, we're going to get into that tonight because we're going to go behind the scenes of Broadway and executive coaching. And we're going to discuss that connection between Broadway and business. We're going to have lessons from the stage. And it's all going to be about how leaders can be better by learning Broadway tips. Maria Guida is a Broadway actress, executive coach, TV spokeswoman, writer, and educator with an experience acting on Broadway and television. Get this. She's worked with Paul Newman, James Earl Jones, Kevin Kline. She's also works with the Fortune 500 executives to speak with power and enhance their leadership impact and influence. Big welcome to Maria Guida to the Rock the Stage Show. Good evening.
Good evening, Rich. It's great to be here.
Thanks for taking the time to be with us today. But when I was going through your credits and looking at those names, and that's not even all of them we're going to talk about tonight. I mean, you've had an incredible career. What was it like, just without not giving it all away, but what was it like to step on stage with like Paul Newman or Linda Ronstadt and those people?
Well, it was really quite a blessing. I can tell you, I've had really an astounding good fortune and great experiences. For example, I can tell you a little bit about my experience with Linda Ronstadt.
Oh, yeah. Please do.
Yeah. Well, because you mentioned her, and I think that I would love to tell you a little bit about my experience with her. You know, in 1980, I had the great joy of working with Linda Ronstadt and Kevin Kline in Joseph Papp's Delacorte Theater production and Broadway run of The Pirates of Penzance.
That's a great play.
It's a great show, and it's also hilarious. And I found Linda to be one of the most down-to-earth people that I have ever known. And she had a quality of commitment to the audience that I had never seen before.
Really?
Oh, yes. And by the time I worked with Linda, she had already been a rock and roll icon for many, many years. But she lacked experience in the setting that we were working in, the Broadway theater. So Here she was, a big star, loved by people all over the world. And she was now working with people who had more experience than she had in this particular setting. Now, at one particular performance, Linda was not happy with the way she had sung. Now, she did all the solos in all the songs, of course, and a few women and I were singing what you could call backup. Yep. And at one particular performance, Linda was laughing during a song. She was laughing at something someone else had done on the stage. And she was laughing so hard that she couldn't stop laughing.
Oh,
she
no.
laughed through the entire song, and she didn't sing one note of the song. She laughed through the entire song. So after the song was over, we all left the stage, as we always did each performance after that particular number. And as soon as I got into the wings, I heard the stage manager say, "Go back out, go back out, go back out. Linda wants to do it again." a do-over,
A
something
do-over in a Broadway play. Oh my God.
something completely unheard of on Broadway. I couldn't believe it. The other actors couldn't believe it, but we went back out on stage. We did the number again, and this time Linda sang beautifully. Now, this experience taught me what a commitment to the audience really means. Linda had a commitment to what was needed in the moment. She didn't care about Broadway tradition. She didn't care about doing things the way it had always been done. She had a commitment to giving her best. She was committed to making it up to her audience. You know, any other Broadway performer in such a situation would probably have left the stage and felt terrible about it or laughed about it.
Right.
Linda didn't care about conventions. She really had a commitment to giving her best. She had a commitment to giving the audience their money's worth, and she did that. Now, this has a very, very close correlation to the corporate business world because commitment has big implications in business.
Oh, yes, definitely. Especially today. Especially people want commitment today from top leaders. They're tired of the fluff.
That's right. And I ask business leaders, I say to them, if you're part of senior management, how committed are you to communicating with your counterparts across departments to build and strengthen relationships? And if you're directly involved in sales, how committed are you to listening to your clients, your prospects, reaching out to them and focusing on what's important to them? And if you're directly involved with customer service, how committed are you to listening and empathizing with clients and customers and prospects so that they will feel heard and appreciated?
Yeah.
So there is no substitute for a strong commitment. It builds loyalty among theater audiences, and it builds loyalty for business leaders as well. And Linda Ronstadt taught me that.
That's amazing. Now, before we go deeper, let's go back to how you first got on Broadway. How did you land your first job on Broadway? So many people dream of it. They aspire of it, but that's a tough cut to make.
Yes. It's a fun story. The year was 1978, and I was standing on stage of the Minskoff Theater, New York City, on Broadway, and I was about to audition for the Broadway musical, King of Hearts. The story takes place in a small French town during World War I, and my agent had told me that they were looking for an actress who can sing and has circus skills. Well, I was about to audition with a lush, romantic ballad with my best French accent, and my plan was to juggle 3 balls in the air at the same time. I didn't study circus skills for nothing. The song was from Kismet. Those promising skies, petals on a pool drifting. After a few bars of music, I bent down, I whipped out 3 lacrosse balls from my purse, and I started to juggle as I continued to sing. And when he moves, and when he walks with me, paradise comes suddenly near. And I dropped all the balls, and they bounced all over the stage. And the Minskoff Theater has a giant stage. Well, I didn't let it stop me, and I kept singing. I ran around that stage, frantically chasing the balls that were bouncing everywhere, and finally picked them all up and continued to juggle and sing until the final note. And this is my beloved. And 2 seconds after I finished, I heard cheering and enthusiastic applause coming from the wings. All the women waiting in the wings for their turn to audition on the Broadway stage, my competition, had burst into applause and were cheering me. I mean, this never happens in a Broadway.
Incredible. That's incredible.
Well, I got the job. Now, so I tell this story to corporate leaders, and I say to them, at some time or another in your business life, you may have dropped the balls. Maybe you were in a meeting and you said an inappropriate thing. Maybe you were giving a business presentation and you made a mistake that was obvious to everyone, and it was a serious mistake. Now, in a situation like that, you only have two choices. Number one, you can pretend it didn't happen, even though everybody heard and or saw it happen. And number two, you can acknowledge that you dropped the balls and move forward with some sort of humility. And humility can be an honest and sincere apology. It could be self-deprecating humor, or it could be that you let people see you try with every fiber of your being to save the situation at hand, and maybe even fail to save it. Because this is really about allowing people to see our humanness. Because most people make mistakes and are sometimes wrong. And most people that we do business with can identify with that.
Well, and that's the big thing today. People are looking for authentic. We're tired of the puffed up. We're tired of the ego. We're looking for authentic leadership more than ever before. And so what you're just describing is so dead on. What people need to hear: roll with the punches, be transparent, take off the mask, be human, right?
Well, I say to my business leaders, I tell them this story, and I hope that they agree that humility is not a weakness. It's actually strategic. It's a quality that makes us more approachable, more likable, and more attractive to do business with. And that's what I learned when I auditioned for the first show that I had on Broadway.
Well, by the way, you still got the chops. That was amazing just to listen to that. So thank you.
Well, thank you. That's very sweet of you. I haven't sung that song in a long time.
Wow. Now, again, you have worked with some amazing people, and I want to go to one of my favorite actors, James Earl Jones.
Many years ago, I had the great honor of being directed by James Earl Jones in a play called The Road to Rome by Robert Sherwood. And this is an anti-war comedy set in ancient Rome. And I was playing Fabia, the wife of the Roman emperor. And at one point in the play, Jimmy, we called James Earl Jones Jimmy.
Jimmy?
Yes, Jimmy directed me to faint. My character was supposed to be so shocked and terrified when Hannibal's army storms into our home that I fall onto the floor in a dead faint. Well, as a young actress, I wanted that faint to be authentic. I wanted that faint to be believable. And I was afraid that if I was not experiencing a big enough emotion in the moment, that I would appear phony. And at every single rehearsal, when we got to that point, I froze and I said to James Earl Jones, Jimmy, I want this to look authentic. I want it to be believable. I don't want to look phony. And at every single rehearsal, James Earl Jones said to me, Maria, just fall onto the floor. Well, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And finally, it wasn't until opening night, that I made a decision. I decided that when it got to the point when I was supposed to faint, no matter how phony I felt, whether I was experiencing a big enough emotion or not, no matter how phony I appeared, I was going to fall onto the floor. And that's exactly what I did. And guess what? The audience bought it. And not only did they buy it, but they laughed so hard that they almost fell onto the floor. So James Earl Jones taught me a very big lesson about being decisive. And this has very big implications in the business world as well.
Yes, indeed.
Many of my clients do presentations all the time. And we've all seen business presentations that are lifeless and boring. And sometimes this happens because speakers are afraid to use their top energy to engage their listeners. They're afraid that if they're not experiencing a big emotion, they're going to appear phony. Yep. Well, I say to leaders, don't worry about appearing phony. You don't have to have a big emotion in order to engage your listeners or take a strong action. Make a decision, be decisive, and go for it. Just go for it.
And it sounds so simple, but when you're on stage, when you're trying to do it in performance, it's not as easy as it sounds. But you bring up an interesting point. We live in a world today where leaders are frozen. They're not decisive at all. We have a pandemic of problems of very indecisive leaderships. Why are they so afraid to pull the trigger and go? Why are they willing? They're just not willing to try anything, are they? Why?
Beats me. Fear. And that's one of the things that is helped by acting improvisation. Studying acting improv helps people to be more relaxed, to go with the flow, to be able to improvise, and it reduces fear, and it actually enhances connectivity.
So I was going to bring your improv experience, because here's a couple of names again. We're going to do some name dropping fun here. Olympic Dukakis, Alan Arkin, John Barton, by the way, if you don't know that name, the London Royal Shakespearean Company. They all helped you learn improvisation, right?
John Barton taught me Shakespeare. I didn't do improv with John Barton.
Okay.
And I didn't do improv with Olympia. I did a lot of great. Olympia taught me so much. She was really a mentor to me, a great actress. But I did study with Alan Arkin, another great actor. And of course, he was one of the original members of the original Second City in Chicago.
Yes.
In the 1950s. And so I did improvisation with him, and he was a master. And of course, he passed away last year.
Yeah.
He was a master at
What was that like to be around that? Because bang, 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 bang. He's probably pulling stuff out all the time, teaching you, illustrating, and trying to get you to do it too. What was it like?
Great fun. And it lowers the inhibitions. And, that's the thing about improvisation. In the workshop, a spirit of fun and playfulness is created. And the key is play. I mean, after all, we are players. Actors are players. We are playing at something, right? So the word play is very relevant. And I also studied with John Monteith and Rand. Do you remember the comedy duo Monteith and Rand?
Yes.
Johnny Carson show.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I also studied with John Monteith, and he was the same way. Quick. An idea, 5 ideas per second.
See, and I love improv clubs. I love watching people, take something out of the hat, do it, bang, 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 play off each other. And that's a real skill to hone that down. But again, you got to just jump in and do it, right? There's no better time than now.
Absolutely. It's all about being in the now and saying yes.
What do you really learn from that? What did you personally learn from them teaching you and coaching? I mean, those are big names, but they invested in you.
I learned to accept what my acting partner was giving me. And if we translate that into the business world, it helps me to accept what people in business are giving me. And it helps me to accept where my clients are, to meet them where they are and not try to make them be something that they will never be. Meet them where they are and do a lot of listening. Because, of course, listening skills are very, very key to improv. And improv really sharpens listening skills.
And also, leaders do need to learn the improv, because even though they have their business plan, they have their other leaders, crap happens. Leaders need to be able to spin and pivot and still lead confidently, don't they?
Well, yes. And, this reminds me of something that I learned when I was doing Shakespeare. May I tell you about that?
Of course.
Well, I love doing Shakespeare. I had the good fortune of playing Kate in The Taming of the Shrew, Phoebe in As You Like It, Desdemona in Othello, and the title role in Hamlet. And you may know that in modern times, many women have played Hamlet.
Yes.
Well, when I played Hamlet, I learned a lot about how important it is to be flexible in front of the audience, exactly what you are talking about right now. Our theater company took Hamlet into the New York City high schools. And at one performance, the kids were not listening to anything that was going on stage. They were throwing things at each other, shouting at each other, jumping out of their seats. They were all kinds of mayhem. And, this was what you would call an extreme example of an audience that was disengaged,
yes,
to put it mildly, right?
Yeah.
And it also gave me an opportunity to share some thoughts with business leaders, people that I coach, who have made presentations for audiences who are distracted and they want to learn how to handle that situation better. This is what happened during that performance of Hamlet. Instead of saying to be or not to be, that is the question,
Right.
I sang it operatically. To be or not to be, that is the question. And when I said to die, to sleep, perchance to dream, I lay on the floor and snored loudly. And when I said, he can be relieved all this with a suicide dagger, I pretended to stab myself in the chest and die. Now, this was not at all what Shakespeare intended for
Not
this
at all.
scene. No. However, it got the kids' attention. And after I got their attention, they started to listen to Shakespeare's words.
Yeah.
So I say to business leaders, in your professional life, when it seems to you like you're not getting through to your stakeholders, when it seems to you that you're not getting through to your audience during a business presentation, how far are you willing to go, appropriately, of course, for your
Yeah.
industry, to get your message across? And wouldn't you be more successful if you could be flexible, improvise, perhaps make a daring choice that just might work for your business sector? So flexibility works for actors playing Shakespeare, and it also works for leaders in any industry.
Well, and I think there's another lesson there too, as well. You have to know your audience, because you said you were talking to school kids. You weren't in a theater with adults all dressed up for the night. You were with children. You have to know your audience, what they listen to, what they relate to. How can you break that glass to pull them in? If you don't know your audience, you're not going to succeed at anything.
Exactly.
Now, I do want to ask you, you work with some big companies, JP
Yes.
Morgan, Johnson Johnson, Morgan Stanley. What's it like when you first approach them and say, I'm going to teach you about executive presence by talking about Broadway? What's their initial reaction to this idea of Broadway and leadership coming together?
I don't always say it first.
Really?
Sometimes, well, depending upon the vibe I get from them or what I already know about them, I sneak it in. Or they know that about me because they've done some research, or they've been, it was a referral. So they already know that I was an actor on Broadway.
Yep.
Or they've read about it on the website or read about any of the other things that I've published. So some people already know. And usually they're very receptive to it, because very often when they call me in, it's because they want their leaders to have greater impact and influence. And they know that the techniques that I am communicating are going to help them to come alive in front of their business audience, engage their audience, give their audience the feeling that, oh, wow, I can relate to this person and I can believe this person. And a lot of the things that I talk about with my clients is the voice, how to use the voice
Yes.
to engage people.
Absolutely.
And, there's been a lot of scientific research about the impact of the voice, and how the voice alone, if you just separate it from content, the voice alone can communicate expertise, confidence, trustworthiness, all of these things that are totally separate from the content. So, of course, actors specialize in that. And my clients tend to really appreciate that kind of work that I do with them.
Well, I've done some coaching in this area myself, and the first thing I tell them is, you have a stage, your podium, your office, wherever you're at, you have a stage. Do you know how to use your stage? And they look at me like I'm crazy. I'm just at work talking to my employees. We're having a conference. I said, that conference room is your stage. And I began to explain to them how you can use your stage, walk around, be dramatic, have a pause, draw the group in closer. And they're looking at me like I'm crazy. But then they finally get it, and they realize they've been playing small instead of playing big. Do you find that very often they're playing small?
Absolutely. They're afraid. They're afraid of appearing phony. They're it's what I said before. They're afraid of appearing phony, and they don't know that when they use their top energy, listeners are drawn in and listeners appreciate it.
Yeah, they absolutely are. Now, you talk about acting objectives. Actors rehearse out loud. They sometimes partner up and prepare for a role. Should top leaders, be doing the same thing before they go out and give a speech, before they give that State of the Union talk they give every year for their business? Should they actually rehearse it and prepare it like they're full on energy?
Well, rehearsing, there's no substitute for rehearsal. However, most people who rehearse, who are not actors, are not rehearsing correctly.
Right.
And many people are doing what their high school teacher told them to do, which is to rehearse in front of a mirror.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know about you, but if I'm in front of a mirror, I'm thinking, oh, I have a pimple here. I'm having a bad hair day. Oh, this lipstick is the wrong color. All I'm doing is focusing on the way I look. That is the last thing that I should think about when I'm in front of the business audience. I do a lot of presentations because I'm a professional speaker in the corporate world as well as a coach. So I think about my costuming, my hair, my makeup, my this, my that. And then I have to forget all that. That's one aspect of preparation, but that's the easy part. The rest of it has to do with focusing on what I want the audience to feel and ultimately what I want that audience to do when they leave my presentation. And so therefore, it's about the mindset. And when I teach people about objectives, I help them to choose an objective moment to moment according to what they want the listener, the business listener, to feel and then do, because it's about doing, right? What do I want these business listeners to do when the presentation is over?
Well, the other big one that I think leaders often miss, they have to talk all the time to fill the air. The power of the pause, the power of the silence is a dramatic tool that actors use all the time. Leaders need to learn when to shut up and let people bring it in, think for themselves, and then go back in. That pause can be very strong, can it?
I always talk about the power of the pause. Do you remember the great actor John Gielgud?
Oh, yes.
And he was famous for his mellifluous voice. And he played Hamlet. He played all the great Shakespearean roles. Do you know what he said? He said that the most important moments of Hamlet's soliloquies are the pauses.
When it's done right, yes. When it's done right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, leaders they have to fill the void. They have to fill the void. What can you tell leaders right now about pause? Take a breath. Take a beat or two. What can they do?
Well, I say be kind to your audience. Recognize that the audience needs a moment to digest what you just said, right? Yeah. Because the audience is taking in a lot. Whether you're in person or on a video, they're listening to your voice, so they're taking in all of the information that the voice conveys, and they're taking in your physicality. They're taking in all of the information that your physicality conveys. They need a moment to digest it all, to make meaning of it for themselves. So I tell them, take a pause, allow them to digest what you've just said and digest the information. And interestingly enough, when we pause, not only does it allow people to digest what we've said, but it draws people in.
Yes.
Many of my clients feel that if they're not talking, people will leave or they'll stop listening. And I say, no, it's the opposite. If you stop talking, people will be glued to you and think, what is she going to say next?
Well, again, on the Broadway stage, there are moments where you drop your voice down and you want the audience to lean in, physically lean in to the stage. And then you'll come back big and strong and they pop back. You have a give and take with the audience. Leaders should be doing the same thing with that. You want your people to lean and say, what's he talking about? What's he saying? And then boom, give it to him, right?
Yes. And not only is it a give and take with the audience, but it's a give and take with my acting partner. So again, it comes back to being improvisational and doing a lot of listening. Whatever information that actor is giving me, I have an objective because I want to do something. Acting is doing something to an object for a person, a purpose. Doing something to an object for a purpose. And this is why when I talk with people about their body language, and sometimes you can tell that they've studied with some, well, let's just say you can tell sometimes when they've studied and learned some things that make them appear awkward.
Yes.
And I say to them sometimes, why are you doing this gesture? For example, I'm not going to demonstrate the gesture, but I have seen business leaders and I have seen politicians do gestures with their hands that no normal person does.
Well, locally on TV, we've got people that are doing this during their commercials. It's like a triangle. Now, the hands don't go anywhere else, and even when they talk, they're like this. The triangle always come together. I'm laughing. I'm going, that looks horrible. Who told you to do that?
Exactly. So I say to people, if that gesture doesn't come from an organic impulse to do something to your audience, don't gesture. There's nothing wrong with standing in front of the audience with your arms down. And sometimes I give them an exercise and I say, spaghetti arms. Do nothing with your arms. I dare you. I challenge you to do nothing. I challenge you to make no gestures at all. You're only allowed to gesture when you have a gesture that's going to be meaningful to you.
I talk about the inflatable balloon at the car lots. You see the little guys. I talk about the chaotic energy of using your body in the wrong way.
Right.
Now, Maria, I do want to go back. You mentioned the virtual stage. You mentioned briefly that now the Zoom camera, things like that. I'm going to go back to that because that's where I specialize. I coach people in now presenting here. This is a stage. Again, people laugh at me when I say it, but the executive leader needs to know here you must bring your energy. You must come alive. If you're boring here, they're playing games on your phone, they're scrolling to other things. You've lost them. Talk about the idea of this new stage and what people can do to really rock this stage.
Well, first of all, it's very, very important to focus the attention where it needs to be. And you said it before, if people are checking their phones, they think that the audience on Zoom or on Teams or whatever, they think that their remote audience doesn't know it. The audience knows it. The audience can see where your eyes are and where your eyes are not, and they can feel where your energy is and where your energy is not. So you're not really getting away with anything just because you're on Zoom. People know it. They know when you're not paying attention to them. That's the first thing I tell them. And that's a rude awakening because they think that they can check their phones and do this or that and nobody will notice.
Right.
Everybody's noticing.
Everybody is noticing.
Yes. So I say, look at the camera, look at the screen, make sure you make eye contact with everybody, share your eye focus. If you're in a meeting, a remote meeting, and there are 10 people in that meeting, share your eyes. Look in the eyes of all the people and look into the camera because you don't know what their camera setup is. And you don't know when you're focusing your eyes on a person, you don't know what your eyes look like on their screen.
Right.
So that means you have to cover all bases, right? Right now, I'm looking into the camera.
Right.
Right? So I say to people, cover all bases. Look into the camera, look at people's eyes, and rehearse it, practice it. Practice it. If it's uncomfortable for you to look at the screen or look into a camera, practice looking into a camera. Set up your camera with nobody there.
Exactly.
And practice it over and over again. Because it's just a question of getting used to it. That's all it is.
Well, what did we do before we started today? One of the things we did before we started was, where do you want me to look, Rich? And I said, look straight forward, right at the camera. And you, great, that's what I'm going to do. Even every time we do this, you have to know where you're looking, where you're going, how you're going to communicate. And again, leaders aren't thinking that way.
Right, exactly. They're not. And so one of the things that I tell them to do is to rehearse correctly.
Yeah.
Don't ever rehearse in front of a mirror. Make sure that you're sharing your focus. If you're going to do a presentation, don't memorize the presentation unless you're an actor, because most people who aren't actors with memorized content,
Yep.
sound memorized, and then what happens if you forget what you're about to say? Then you are lost unless you have really sharp improvisational skills.
Right.
So I tell my clients, okay, you can take notes, prepare notes for your presentation, and most of my clients use PowerPoint to a high degree. And I say to them, don't make PowerPoint your higher power.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I love
Right?
you.
Okay, so I say to them, you are the star of the show.
Yes.
And star is not a dirty word. You are the star of the show, and the PowerPoint is there to help you. You are not there to help the PowerPoint. If that were true, then the audience could just read your presentation on the train going home. Why would they need a human being in front of them? No PowerPoint presentation, no matter how good the content is going to be as dynamic and persuasive as a live human being who can be captivating. Nothing on the page on your train ride home is going to be captivating the way a speaker can be captivating.
But this goes back to what we began with. Leaders are hiding, and they're hiding behind their PowerPoint. Look at the screen and listen to me. They're hiding. Where what you're talking about, what I'm talking about is step out on stage and own the spotlight and be a leader and be dramatic about it. Be strong.
Right.
Be convincing that you've got this thing under control and you know where you're leading, right?
Yes. I say to people, do a little extra work. Okay, you have your PowerPoint presentation, but that shouldn't be the source of your content. Take notes about what you want to say. Then write it out if you need to. And the last thing you should do is prepare your PowerPoint slides. Only 3 points per slide. Have as few slides as possible, right?
Yes.
Only 3 points per slide. And make sure that when you're doing all of this work, when you rehearse, speak your notes. Look down and look up. PowerPoint slides were never designed to be notes for a speaker. They're not speaker notes.
They're not.
They're only a visual aid to the audience and minimal.
Well, I tell them to use more pictures, less words.
Oh, absolutely.
Because then you storytell and they have a visual while you storytell.
Absolutely.
It's a powerful backdrop.
Absolutely. Pictures, 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 pictures.
Well, Maria, this has been fabulous, but we do want to share with the audience your website. Hit the QR code, go to our website, but what are they going to find when they go and check out your website?
Well, they'll find information about my background. They'll find lots of articles that I've written about how they can be more impactful when they speak. There's a whole section there on articles that they can read. There must be at least 20, 25 articles that I've written there. Then there's a section about things that I've had published in different magazines like the Society for Human Resource Management, the National Speakers Association, the New York Lawyers Association, New York City Bar Association, etc. They can also take a look at some of the videos that I've created that are on my YouTube channel, on my website, but also a section where I give tips specifically for remote meetings.
Maria, that's fabulous. Hit the QR code. Make sure you check it out. And also find her on social media. You can always follow her along as well. Before we wrap up here, what was your favorite, funniest moment on stage that you, the cast, what was your favorite, funniest moment, and who were you hanging out with doing that event, that show with?
Well, shall I tell you a secret?
Yeah.
Once on Broadway, when I was wearing a very, very antique costume, I was wearing bloomers. You know, the old-fashioned bloomers?
Yes.
And the bloomers fell down around my ankles in front of the audience.
No.
Yes. It happened.
How did you play that? What did you do?
I let them, they were down around my ankles, and I was standing I was stage left, and I was standing fairly close to the wings So I kicked the bloomers into the wings and continued the scene.
Maria Guida, that's a great way to end our show tonight. That's a beautiful story. Thank you very much. Thank you for being on Rock the Stage. A pleasure having you here tonight.
It was a real pleasure and fun. Thank you.
Maria Guida. Again, you're going to want to check out the name, check out our website, check out our YouTube channel. What an amazing time. Just the names, the actors, the stories. I mean, come on. To be on stage with Linda Ronstadt, James Earl Jones, and have those memories, but then to have the stories. And executive leaders, I hope you were listening today, because there's so much to learn about what the stage can do for you. Study actors. Study what you see people doing. Pay attention to the theater, because like it or not, you do have a stage, you do have a voice, and it matters how you show up each and every time. Hey, that's going to do it for tonight on the Trigger Rich Bontrager. We will be back next week, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, for another edition of Rock the Stage Show. Until then, have a great week, and come on back and join us for Rock the Stage Show.